Hi there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be working with the Simon Says Stamp May 2017 card kit. So starting out for the first card, I wanted to go ahead and use those fine line Crayola markers that were included in the kit. I'd seen some others doing some videos with these and it looked as though they were blending really well, so I wanted to give it a try. I started out going directly with the pen onto the watercolor paper, and this worked, but I seemed to have a lot of lines showing in my coloring. So once I got to the second line, I started putting water down first and then adding in my color. And this seemed to help it blend, and sort of the marker just kind of bled right into the water, and it gave me a little bit of a more solid color. So overall, I think I'm happy with the results that I got using the Crayola markers. I'm used to using the Zig pens, and those are my preference, but if you're not sure or you're just getting into watercoloring for card making, I think these would be a great option to start with, so you can get an idea of how these would work. Now you'll notice down in the bottom corner that blue pot that I colored started to bleed into the bottom of the page, and that was my fault. I had too much water. So I had a moment of frustration because I could not clean that up. The card just kept pilling, and it was just terrible. So I was ready to scrap the whole thing, and then I thought, no, how can I make this work? So what I ended up doing was fussy cutting out all of the individual pots, and what I ended up with at the end, I actually like a lot better than the card panel, so I guess it was kind of a happy accident, although the card took me probably 3 times as long as it originally should have. So here I'm running all of those fussy cuts through my Zycon sticker maker. I'm then going to trim a piece of Nina Solar White down to 4 by 5 1/4. Using my ATG gun, I've attached that to the top of one of the Lime A4 size cards. I'm using throughout this card kit some sentiments from Tailored Expressions. This is their Come On Get Happy set. It has a lot of different sentiments and sayings. I thought this one in particular, with the way that the word you is kind of sketchy looking, it matched really well with all of the succulents. There were no sentiments included in with this stamp set, so I thought this would be a good set to use since it gave me a lot of options and I wasn't pulling in a bunch of different stamp sets. Here I've used the grid that I have for use with my MISTI just to lay out where I want to position those on the card. They are sticky on the back, and once you place them down, it's hard to move them. So I'm just first attaching them just the bottom pot area, and then once I have them arranged the way I like them, I'll go ahead and press them down flat onto the card. And that will complete card number 1. For card number 2, I'm working with the other watercolor panel that came in the kit. Once again, I'm going to lay down my water before I add in the color. It seemed to me that the lighter colors in this marker set, the pink and the yellow especially, they didn't seem to be quite as juicy, and I'm not sure if that is maybe because they're lighter pigment colors, but I just couldn't seem to get the amount of color out of those the same as I could the darkers, like the orange or the red or that really dark green. So I ended up going in and adding some of my Zig markers. Here I'm using color 021 to add that pink in. It was just looking a little too orange for what I was going for. And then for the beak and the legs, I brought in my Zig 050 to get a more saturated yellow color to mix with the orange from the Crayola kit. I started out using the Crayola red here, and like I said, this color does move better, but by the time I added the water, it just was a little too close to the pink color of the flamingo. So I ended up taking some of that color off and then coming in again with my Zig marker. This is number 200, just to get a deeper saturated color of red for the heart. I trimmed the panel down to 4 by 5 1/4. I'll pop that up here using some Scotch foam tape. I'll place that on top of a navy card base. Then I'll add some Spectrum Noir shimmer pen to the red heart, and that will complete card number 2. For card number 3, I'm trimming down one of the papers that came in the kit to 3.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to layer that on top of a white card base using my ATG gun. Then I'm going to cut from some scrap black cardstock using the Simon Says stamp Thanks Online die cut. I cut 3 of those, and I'm going to layer them on top of one another using multi-matte medium. Then again, using my multi-matte medium, I'm going to attach this to the front of the card, and I'm going to follow right along that line that falls in between the floral pattern paper and the white card base. Then to finish up the card, I added some Nuvo drops. This color is Ebony Black, and that will complete card number 3. For card number 4, I'm going to use the Flamingo animation stamp. Here I'm using a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle border. This measures 2 3/4 by 4 inches, and I'm creating a window in one of the turquoise papers that came in the kit. Here I'm going to trim this down so that it's 4 by 5.5. I'm going to cut the transparency down to 3.5 by 4 3/4, and I'll attach that then on the back side of the window that I cut. Now I'm moving pretty quickly here. If you need some detailed information on how I made these sliders, I would tell you to take a look at the previous 2 videos I've done working with the Uchi's animation die kits. I'm basically doing the same type of principle here. In those videos it's just a little bit slower, so it'll probably be slightly easier to understand. So I'm going to line the transparency up with the lines on my cutting mat and make sure that this is nice and straight. Now I need to cut the cardstock that's going to actually be the slider portion of the card, and I ended up cutting this down to 3 5/8 by 4.5. And here I'm using my grid acetate to line this up. I'm going top to bottom in several different areas of the stamp, since it is a shaped stamp, to make sure that all of those are straight up and down. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp this 2 or 3 times to make sure that I get a nice crisp image. As I go along with each step of this process with the animation stamps, I make sure that it's working. So here I'm just double checking that. Now I'm going to create the channel that my slider is going to fit into, and I just trimmed down some Scotch foam tape, I believe in half. This should be about 1/4 of an inch wide. So I'm just lining that around my slider to make sure that I'm leaving just enough room for that to slide easily back and forth. Here I had picked up some of the Doodlebug washi tape that has flamingos on it, so I thought that would be a really cute little something extra when you start to slide the card. You're not going to see it on the outside, but then when you do slide it, it's just this sort of extra pop of color. Here I'm using one of the dies that came in another kit that I had purchased from Uchi's Design separately. This is going to make a little tab that I can put on the edge of the slider to make it easily movable. You could easily recreate this by just cutting a rectangle, scoring it down the middle, and then closing that around your slider. I've removed the backing from the Scotch foam tape and attached my window to the top of my card. I then cut a strip of pattern paper from the sunglasses paper and a matching strip from, I believe this is Neenah Solar White. I'm going to fishtail the edges of both of those and then attach them to the front of my card. Finally, to finish this card up, I'm going to add some Nuvo drops. The colors I'm using are apple green, dandelion yellow, and carnation pink. That will complete card number 4, and here I've slowed things down to real time so you can see exactly how cool that animation is. Here I'm using Lawn Fawn's Puffy Cloud border die to cut out some clouds. And using my ATG gun, I'm going to attach those to the top of one of the gray papers that came in the kit. I have trimmed the paper down to 4 by 5 1/4, and here I'm trimming off the edges hanging over of the clouds. I decided I wanted to use the kite that came on the acetate sheet, and I'm just trimming around that. I'm leaving just a small border around the entire image. I'm using multi-matte medium just on the colored sections of the kite to attach that to the panel here. And then using my ATG gun again, I will attach this panel onto the front of the white card base. I did have a little bit of excess from the kite that I cut out on the bottom, so I just trimmed that even with the card. Here I'm stamping the sentiment, "You make me happy when skies are gray," which I thought was just perfect. And that will complete card number 5. For card number 6, I'm going to be working with some animation stamps again. I wanted to create a nice colorful background using some of the papers that came in the kit. These were the backside of the papers. So I'm using a 5 1/4 by 4 white panel, and then I've trimmed down these stripes to 1 5/16 by 4 inches, and I'm just attaching those using my ATG gun. Then here I'm using the Simon Says Tri-Square Craft Die to cut out 3 windows in that panel. Here I'm again lining up my stamps using the grid that's on the back paper of my MISTI, just making sure the lines in the stamps are lined up perfectly with the lines on the grid. And I have cut down a piece of Neenah Solar White to 5 by 3 3/4. Now I do end up trimming that eventually, but I would suggest that you start out with a larger piece because you can always take away. And again, I'm going to stamp these several times to make sure I get really nice crisp lines. Here I'm attaching the transparency grid to the back of my windows. Just full disclosure, I only had enough for 2 of the windows using the transparency that came in the stamp kit, but I had some extra from the previous videos that I had done, so I did use 1 additional square from that. I've used that same die cut to create a tab, and here I'm attaching that to the slider panel. I'm going to stamp the sentiment on the inside of my card. And then to finish up this card, I'll add some Nuvo drops, and I'm again using the color Ebony Black. Card number 7 is going to be my final card using the animation stamps. Here I have trimmed down the orange panel to 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm using the Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle border to cut out a 3 1/2 by 2 1/4 window. I have created a slider panel that measures 3 by 5 1/4. Again, I've lined up my stamps using the grid on the MISTI, and I'm going to stamp these several times to make sure I get a nice crisp image. Here I'm attaching the acetate window. I just had enough to attach this, just barely. And again, I've created a channel exactly the same way that I had done in the previous 2 cards. I'm going to attach that window to the top of my card. And here I'm stamping the sentiment, "All you need is love." It's a little hard to tell, but that animated cactus is actually juggling a heart, so I thought that was a really cute sentiment to match with that. I'm adding some washi tape here, and I trimmed out just 1 line of the hearts from the heart paper that came in the kit and created a banner edge along that. I'm gonna layer that on top of the washi tape, and then I will pop up that square sentiment using some Scotch foam tape. Along my panel, I'm going to again add a strip of washi tape for a little something extra. And as you can see, I again cut a tab out of that green cardstock and added that on the edge. And that will complete card number 7. So card number 8 here is fairly simple. I took the numbered paper that came in the kit and I have trimmed that down to 2.5 by 5 1/4. A friend of mine has a 30th birthday coming up, so I then also took the numbered acetate and I'm just trimming that into strips so I can cut out the 3 and the 0 that I want for the front of the card. I then fussy cut out each of those numbers using my Tim Holtz Tonic scissors. These work really great for your heavier cardstock and things like this. This acetate was really thick. Here I've attached the paper to the top of the card. And these sheets of acetate, they sort of have a film on them, and I figured out it was a protective covering. Part of the edge of one of these came up, so just make sure you peel that off and it'll look much clearer once you do. And I'm just going to attach the 30 at the bottom there using Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. I decided I wanted to stamp the sentiment happy in front of this 30 here, and I left this part in. A lot of times I will have trouble lining up my red rubber stamps. It's just harder to see, and even when I use the grid on my Missy, I oftentimes get them crooked. So I keep a pack of Post-it notes and I will stick them down to make sure that my stamp is straight before I go ahead and ink it on the card. And that completes card 8. For card number 9, I decided I wanted to make a shaker card. So here I'm using what's left of the flamingo paper that came in the kit. I loved this paper. It has the stand tall and be courageous sentiments on the front of it. And I literally had just enough. Like, I was just able to fit it inside that Lawn Fun rectangle. And this size is 4 by 2 3/4, same stitch rectangle I always use. And then I also used a piece of Neenah cardstock that was trimmed down to 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm using the same rectangle to cut the center out of that. Now here I'm using that Post-it I used in the last card just to hold that on top of my card front. And I'm going to use my ATG gun just to position that for the background of my shaker. I have cut some acetate down to just larger than the window I cut there. And here I'm using some score tape to place around the edge of that, and I'm gonna peel up the backing and then I'll place the acetate on top of that. Now I'm going to build up a wall around my border there, and I'm using a double layer of Scotch foam tape. For the center of my window, I'm using some pink sequins. These are sort of flat sequins from Recollections, and I got these at Michael's. It came in a multi-pack of several different colors. And I've also used some Studio Katya Crystal Clear Fusion sequins, and these are gorgeous. The camera really doesn't do them justice. They have just catch the light beautifully. Here I've peeled back the backing of my foam tape, and I'm just placing that on the front. Once I get that lined up, I'll peel off the rest of the backing. And I decided to stamp on the inside, Sending You a Smile, and I'm using Stampin' Up's Flirty Flamingo ink for that. Card number 10 is again fairly simple. I'm just trimming down this paper to 4x5 1/4. I'm going to use my ATG gun and attach that to the top of a navy card base. I'm going to stamp the sentiment hello on some Neenah cardstock. Then I will trim that down, and I also went ahead and created a banner edge on one end of it. I wanted to add a little more there, so I'm adding some washi tape, and this is a yellow and clear stripe, and then I had a green and white polka dot. Then I'm going to pop my sentiment up on some Scotch foam tape. And I don't have it in the video here, but after I got that attached on the front, I decided it needed a little something extra. So I also added 3 Nouveau Dandelion Yellow drops just before the hello, and you will see that on the picture at the end. To finish that up, I just placed in another Neenah panel. This again measures 4x5 1/4. Here is a quick look at what I have left in my card kit. As you can see, there's not a ton left, lots of scraps. And then of course I have my stamp set, and I also have the markers, which when I had finished with those, I already went ahead and put them away, so they're not still in my box. So this completes our card video for today. Close-ups of the cards as well as a full list of supplies can be found at my blog post, linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.